Plymouth, Michigan, began as a trading stop for Native Americans. The first settlers arrived in 1825. Commerce evolved from fur trading to farming to industry, and all while the community knew the importance of gathering and entertainment. This video will use footage of the wonderful exhibits at the Plymouth Historical Museum to show the progression of growth of this dynamic small city. I'm here with Lorna Nitz, docent or tour guide and educator here at the Plymouth Historical Museum. So Lorna, tell me about the trading outpost.
The trading outpost was located actually near Detroit, what is now Detroit. It was the trading post for the Native Americans walking particularly a long distance from the western side of what is now the community of Ann Arbor. And they would walk across here in the what is now the Plymouth area, following the streams and water for transportation and also places to camp because of the topography. And they would walk to Fort Detroit to trade and with the people for a variety of things. They would trade animal skins and very often some of their foods such as squash and corn.
The trading outpost evolved into the farming community. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Many of the people that initially came were not farmers. They had been business people from the East, and they were really quite wealthy, and they would come with little chests, like small trunks with coins and money in them, and that's why they were able to purchase the land. And the land at that time, that was one of the reasons they actually came into the community, because there was a national act at the time called the 1920 Land Accumulation Law, and they could buy the land very cheap, and they would buy large particles of it. And as far as farming, that would have been done simply for the substance and for the use of their families at that particular time. So they would have been very small farms. Corn was one of the products, and the Native Americans had shown them and helped them to know how to grow that.
Did they use any tools, or did they work by hand with the farming?
They would not have used farm machinery as we know it now. They would have used handmade tools made from both wood and metal. The metal parts would have been made by the local blacksmiths when they arrived. There was only one in Plymouth here at the time. And then they would use those tools made from wood and metal, but no electric tools. They were very creative in what they made. And those things that are on display in a variety of museums show the particular quality of the products that they used. Even the housewives would use those wooden tools for their household chores, such as taking corn off the husks and that type of thing.
Now back then they used horse and buggy. Can you elaborate on that?
I would say that most of the transportation that they used when they came to a community like Plymouth would have been walking. There might have been a few bicycles later on, and also later in history, probably after the first 15 years, they would have had horse and buggies, because when they brought their families originally from other areas, they would have ridden horseback and probably had one or two wooden wagons to transport their possessions.
How did the roads evolve as the transportation evolved along with it?
Here in the museum we have a walking timeline that shows especially how the roads evolved, and that's why it's called the walking timeline. The first part of the walking timeline represents dirt, and they would have walked strictly on dirt and traveled on dirt. The second part was because of the rain, and it would cause a lot of mud in the roads because of the dirt, and they started to lay down just wood boards or pieces of wood so that their wagon wheels and also just walking and their animals and so forth could walk on those. Then those were called plank roads, and there's a very interesting history about plank roads too, when they actually became toll roads, because many of the wagons were very heavy. So on these dirt roads, they would put the planks down on the right-hand side, and that's when the wagons would use those, when the wagons would be full of the products that they were taking to trade or to sell. And then when they came back, and they had to pay a toll for those. Then when they came back from market with their empty wagons, they would use the left side and travel only on the dirt, and they did not have to pay a toll.
Can you tell me about the Ford factory?
Henry Ford actually purchased the grist mill, which is over in the part of Old Village now. And he made that into his initial factory, but it was used only for small parts. When I say small parts, I'm talking about an assembly line that would have made these small parts and then taken out to wherever he was making his cards, was a variety of places. And what's really interesting about that was, and a real boon to history in general, was the fact that he hired local women to work on the assembly plant. And it was really the first time in this community area where women worked outside of the home. And we have many of our volunteers and older ladies here in our community that worked on the assembly line. Margaret Dunning, who is now 102 years old, worked on the assembly line, but not for long because she didn't like it. She was a very, very good friend of Henry Ford's from the day she was born.
And what about the Daisy Air Rifle Factory?
The Daisy Air Rifle Factory became very important here in Plymouth for many, many years. And it was important because they did make the Daisy Air Rifles. And the Daisy Air Rifles became so popular that they circulated around the world. Many people, of course, here in the Plymouth area were employed there, and that was very important to the economy of Plymouth itself. But the Daisy Air Rifles themselves were important because they were sold around the world. And on the handle of the rifle, it said Plymouth. And Plymouth became known around the world for that reason as a location in the United States.
What significance did windmills have in the city of Plymouth?
Windmills were one of the first product that was made here in Plymouth, long before the Daisy Air Rifle Factory. And it eventually became the windmill capital of the world.
What did they do for entertainment back in the days of early to mid-early Plymouth?
On Main Street, where the old buildings were, that would be across from what is now Kellogg Park, there were a variety of sources of entertainment, both on Main Street and also down what is Penniman Avenue. It was Starkweather Street then. But they had dance halls, and when I say dance halls, they would be on the second story of one of the big buildings. And they were used for social dancing and for parties. And then also for entertainment, they would have had all kinds of celebrations for every holiday imaginable. And one of the biggest ones and most well known here in the community were the 4th of July celebrations. So there was a variety. And then the Penn Theater, which has existed for many years, it has a long, long history. But originally the theater was located in the 3rd floor and the 2nd floor of a building on Penniman. And when it burned, and then they rebuilt, and the same person that owned that theater built the Penn Theater.
What significance does Kellogg Park have in the entertainment here in Plymouth?
Entertainment here in Plymouth exists 7 days a week, from early morning very often until late at night. And it might be used for very simple entertainment, like just evening walks with the children and the dog down the paths and the sidewalks around Kellogg Park, playing in the fountain. The other thing that I observe when I drive through or walk through Plymouth is the fact that people are riding their bicycles. I've often seen it used for wedding celebrations. In Kellogg Park, probably the most utilized facility is the portable bandstand that they bring in. And we have local bands, they bring in special bands, and at that time we will have hundreds and hundreds of people here in the park for the music celebrations. Kellogg Park, of course, also is used when we have Art in the Park, which is always the first weekend after the 4th of July here in Plymouth. And there are many of us that volunteer for that. They have booths in there for the park and for the celebrations. The other entertainment that would be there in Kellogg Park are classes gather there, and they do even plays, that type of thing. So it's used for a variety of entertainment sources. Then the other thing downtown Plymouth, surrounding the park, are the variety of parades, and those might be bicycle parades by scouts. Right now at the holiday we have a parade of scarecrows. lined up along the park. It's just lots and lots of very interesting and unique things, all done by the community.
The Plymouth Historical Museum does a great job of showing how history in Plymouth evolved throughout the years. And I thank you, Lorna, for sharing your knowledge. And I would really recommend that anybody come down to the Plymouth Historical Museum and visit anytime.